Good morning and welcome to the International Connection. We are continuing with our radio series on mind control. This is week number 7 in the series. And we've heard so far a lecture by Dr. Colin Ross about the documented history of creating multiple personalities in people to be used as Manchurian candidates or programmed agents. Colin Ross talked about the documented evidence of LSD experiments with children where they were kept on strong daily doses of LSD for up to months at a time. And also the use of brain implant experiments on children by George Esterbrooks, who is another Canadian doctor that was involved in U.S. national security mind control experiments. We heard last week the testimony of mind control and radiation experiments conducted on children that was introduced at the presidential hearings on radiation experiments in 1995. President Clinton has since publicly apologized and compensated some of the victims of the radiation experiments. Survivors of mind control are now calling for hearings on the mind control experiments in particular. Today, we are airing the story of Ronald Howard Cohen, who was abducted and severely drugged by CIA and military in the late 60s. Ronald Cohen was an activist in the early 60s in the United States, and he is a writer. He has subsequently written a book about his experiences, only to have the book stolen, the transcripts of the book stolen, and he was told he was not publishing a book by the CIA and the FBI. You're listening to CKLN 88.1. Here is the story of Ronald Howard Cohen.
Transgressions by Ronald Howard Cohen. Prologue. Step 1. The Patricians. We need to surprise human guinea pigs. Volunteers won't do. We need to take people by surprise. It's as simple as that. The speaker stopped, looked at the man he was talking to, and took a deep breath. It's field research, he went on. That's all, just field research. You mean United States citizens, not Orientals or Europeans? Yes, don't look at me like that. Better us do it to them than someone else. Don't bring up the menace to me. I'm not big on that. United States citizens, that's what we're talking about here, right? Yes. What's wrong with you? I said yes. God, man. You've put screws into wood. You know it takes some effort. Both of us have been in the world long enough to know that everything has a risk element to it. Field research, that's all. Some things aren't pretty, you know that. Don't make me out like I'm a bad guy. I'm responding to a need, that's all. Anyway, it's not something I brought you in here to debate. It's been cleared from above. Your job is simply to get to work on it.
I'm here speaking with Ronald Howard Cohen, a writer and victim and survivor of abduction and drugging experiments by the U.S. government. And welcome to the show, Ron.
Oh, good morning, Wayne. It's a pleasure being here, and I really want to sincerely thank you for having the courage to have me on, since it's proved to be a very difficult task to find somebody with any courage at all who has access to the public media.
I'd like to thank you for coming on as well. It's a courageous act in talking about this, and I'm, as you're well aware, and probably a lot of the listeners know, that there's many forces out there that don't want this information to get out into the public, and so I appreciate you telling your story.
Okay, I guess it's possible that I should start with a little brief introduction about who I am. I'm a 53-year-old writer who was born in the Bronx, New York, about 6 blocks from Yankee Stadium. I was raised with the idea that I might become the first Jewish president of the United States, and I used to think that the founding fathers were great human beings. And then in the 1960s, I became very active. I've always been a writer. I've been a writer since I was 14. I've always considered it part of my calling. And in the 1960s, I became very active in the civil rights movement and in the peace movement. Worked with SNCC and CORE and the War Resisters League. And I spent 12 years living in the Village and the Lower East Side in New York. I was a very hip dude. And I was an original flower child in Haight-Ashbury in 1967. I was one of the original coterie of the people who got that all off the ground. And in doing so, I became part of, apparently, I became part of Mr. Nixon's 20,000 or so shit list, and became tagged. I'm assuming from the research that I've done that this was as per the Houston Project, which was something, a coordination of the CIA and the FBI and U.S. Army intelligence to get all those radicals, because Kissinger was convinced and telling Nixon, like, we've got 1915 out there, for God's sakes, Richard, and we've got to do something about it. So.
Did you have any indication that you were being monitored or targeted at that point?
Oh, well, you see, that's very interesting, because I was sincerely a member of the counterculture, and in sincerely being a member of the counterculture, like what our reason death was to change the world, And so we used to like kid around, like, and sort of like, to prove your mettle would be, how many undercover knocks did you turn? And get them to quit the force and become hippies, or how many undercover guys did you get to actually have a drink with you, or even smoke some dope and say, like, start telling you about, it's not a great job and blah blah blah, so it was sort of like, confrontation was like part of the game. Like, I hitchhiked over 100,000 miles, I don't know, it may have been 150,000 miles all over the United States. I started out as a careerist. I started out working in newspapers in New York. I received the quickest promotion, one of the quickest promotions, may have been the quickest promotion in the New York Mirror's history, from copy boy to assistant editor. And then I worked on trade journals in New York, and I was a careerist. And then the Vietnam War was happening, and the civil rights movement, and then all of that took place. But so, what's your question? I've lost the thread of what you were asking.
Whether you had any indication of being monitored,
but it wasn't a thing that was a big deal. It was sort of like, well, obviously, if we are the best minds of our generation, and we refuse to be defeated, okay. Well, you're challenging the dragon. The dragon's going to breathe fire at you.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, sure.
Right.
That didn't bug me.
Yeah, it's so after maybe we could talk about what you were doing at the time of the abduction, and to talk about the abduction itself.
Oh, let me just give a little bit of background about what MK Ultra was. Which is not the easiest thing in the world to do, because Mr. Helms, who was the head of the CIA, and Sidney Gottlieb, who was the CIA director of the project, their liaison with the Department of Defense, supposedly either shredded or burned all of the files on this. Now, John Marks, who wrote a book about called The CIA and the Cult of Intelligence, after they claimed to have burnt all the files on MK Ultra, he came across some documents, and I've read other things that people say, other researchers, they say, like, oh man, they didn't burn the documents as cover story, but like, if it's buried deep, I don't know. Mm-hmm. So, but what MK Ultra was a major project. The sincerity of the reason dead, as far as I can make out, is that if you are doing noble work as being a warrior class, and you are a spy for the warrior class, then one of the things that you have to cover is, like, well, what happens if they capture one of us? What are they going to do to us? Okay. Well, I don't know. They might give us all sorts of drugs. And they might torture us, but we've been through that. Or they might use more sophisticated things with rays and with God knows what else. Maybe they'd even use like just thoughts. Like, you can just go off into all sorts of trips. Okay, so there were 6 major divisions, and what happened
of
with
the MK Ultra
of the
project,
MK, as far as I understand, and what happened with the project that I think I was tagged under, which, if I'm correct, was subproject 255. Okay, and this, by the way, which came out during the Carter administration, the Senate hearings that they had with Senator Kennedy and Senator Church, was stuff where they basically had worked with U.S. Army people. The BBC did a wonderful documentary on some of the stuff, giving LSD and then running U.S. Army people through calisthenics. I mean, like they ruined people's minds. I mean, and then they did, black prisoners. I mean, because the United States is a racist, class-conscious society. They had given drugs to black prisoners or people in mental institutions. I mean, they were discountable. I mean, so what? Okay, but yeah, from what from the documentation I read and the testimony that was given in front of the Senate committees in 1970s, that went on. But then the big issue, as far as I understand, was okay, we got this data. Okay. Now, one of the interesting things also, they have many different types of drugs. Okay. And because I became very well acquainted, I was part of the drug culture. Okay. I became very well acquainted with what marijuana was. I became acquainted with what LSD was. Okay. What I was given was not LSD and it was not marijuana. It screwed up my mind for 5 years. Okay. And so they had lots of choices, but in just from what I understand, in dealing with this was in the late 60s, in dealing with the LSD, they had given it in laboratory settings to people, and everybody had a bad trip. I mean, they were just miserable, right? So then they decided to do field research with that, and then there's a lot of conjecture whether the whole hippie movement was a CIA-sponsored project, but that's more fantasy than reality to me. But anyway, they did. I mean, Lilly Corporation in Indianapolis, as far as I understand, bought a lot of their drugs for them. But as far as I understand, if you released more documents, people could be a little firmer on what their understandings are. As a matter of fact,
Sandoz as well were. Manufacturing LSD for the CIA.
Right. The only thing that what they then decided was look, we've got to find people unsuspecting, okay? Because if given their reasoning, okay, that if they're looking to protect their agent, okay, they're not going to have a situation coming. Somebody's going to come up to them and say, "Excuse me, could I give you this dangerous drug?" Right? So they needed to just take somebody and just give them this drug. Okay. So the situation was politically, well, here's these hippies, and they're taking drugs. Okay. Well, they don't get along with their families. Okay, and they're all traveling around hitchhiking. I mean, they're easy game. Okay, so we pick up a couple of hippies. What are they going to do? They're going to go to the police and say I'm stoned. I mean, so that's from what I understand where I came into the picture. Now, where I came into the picture personally is I was hitchhiking. I lived. I was very counterculture. I'd given up my career, sold all my suits, and I was basically in a different garb and hairstyle. And so I was living, and situating myself in different communities, which was the Lower East Side and Greenwich Village in New York, Berkeley and San Francisco in California, and other sections in L.A. or Taos, New Mexico, or Boulder, Colorado. There were Madison, Wisconsin. There were little pockets, okay, of sort of counterculture communities, okay? Because that was one of the central thrusts. I mean, the 60s has gotten such a terrible bad rap. There were the basic good thing that I experienced, what the 60s was doing, really had nothing to do with drugs. What it had to do with was, because that was a tool, and that's the way that I looked at it, was whether the dog wags the tail or the tail wags the dog. Okay, the thing that and I haven't touched drugs in 15 years, I mean, but the way that that we looked at things was that, look, there's no community. I mean, everything's screwed up, you know. Why is everything screwed up? There's no sense of community, okay? And people function in a world that they don't like. Why don't they like it? Because it's competitive. Okay? Well, let's try to have a cooperative community. Well, to the executive powers, that's communism. What are you talking about? Okay? So, you know, that's where the new left, you know, came in. Although I wasn't political any longer at that point. At that point, what I had decided was, like, I tried politics. I was getting arrested on demonstrations and all that. It didn't matter, you know. I mean, some guy burnt himself to death in front of the Pentagon, and Nixon said he was watching football games, you know. I mean, so what mattered, it seemed to me, was a changing of personal self, okay, and changing about how you relate to the next person you meet. That's what mattered, okay. I mean, there's the same philosophy that Mother Teresa functioned on, although that's a whole other case. But anyway, okay, so I'm hitchhiking between these communities, and I used to hitchhike across the country. I mean, like, you know, I would do it in 5 or 6 days. It was just like, you know, like going around the corner for a container of milk to me, you know. Okay, so I'm hitchhiking through in Indianapolis, Indiana. Okay, the crossroads.
You're going from the
I'm
West
going
Coast?
from the West Coast to the East Coast. Okay, and so I'm hitchhiking through Indianapolis, Indiana. I get picked up by this gentleman who wants to discuss, you know, the Vietnam War, right? And immediately, I mean, all I wanted to do was get a ride. I mean, you know, you know. So I sort of debate. You know, it's sort of like, you know, if you know, a born-again Christian picks you up and wants to discuss religion, you know, it's sort of like, okay, is this worth 300 miles, you know, or, you know, I mean, like, so, okay. Anyway, so the, and excuse my cynicism, remember I'm from New York City. I've been here for 20 years. I try to modify it, but it slips back every once in a while. Anyway, so the thing was, this guy picks me up, and he wants to discuss the Vietnam War. So finally, you know, I say, oh, the hell with this guy's a jerk. And so I start telling him my views about the Vietnam War, right? So immediately he isn't going very far any longer, okay? I said, I blew the ride. All right, so he lets me off, okay? So I hope I've established my sanity before we get into this, because this starts getting a little weird. And the thing when you start talking about stuff that's weird, you know, if somebody's listening to you who doesn't know you, it's sort of like, who's this weirdo talking about weirdness, you know? And like, you know, I am not weird. I mean, believe me, after 5 years of being nuts, you know, I know what weird is, okay? And like, I got my feet on the ground, okay? But what I start talking about here, if it sounds bonkers, it's bonkers. And it was U.S. government policy that was bonkers, okay? I mean, these projects, you know, started in 1947 as
Right.
Artichoke and Bluebeard, and then became MK Ultra, and it was supposed to have only gone on from 1953 to 1977, but that's open to conjecture whether it's not still going on. But anyway, or debate. Anyway, I'm standing on the side of the road, okay, and this gray car comes and picks me up, okay, and I got into the car and I knew how to read drivers. I'd done a lot of hitchhiking, really well, okay. So this guy's in an iron starched, you know, white shirt, slacks, short haircut, nothing in the car. I mean, no bouncing doggy heads or dice, or, you know, and no music going. I mean, like, so I said, like, I don't know, insurance salesman, right? You know, so I figured, like, okay, I got in the car, thanked him for giving me a ride, and immediately, you know, I wanted to know how far are you going, you know. He's going, a while. So that meant to me, well, if you're interesting and you're not threatening, you're stopping to pick somebody up, so you got to cool them out and tell them you're not threatening. So you talk sex or you talk football or whatever, to just, or music or something. Okay. So I tried just chatting this guy up, right? Nothing. Straight arrow ahead, right? So immediately I go into my mind, I've been through all sorts of situations with people showing me their guns in cars and, or people who pick you up and say, I'm going to rob the gas station up the road, and, why don't you let me out before you do that, and stuff like that, So, I immediately, since this guy, is not saying anything, I just thought, is this one a weirdo? Is this guy dangerous to me, right? All right. So I asked him, can I smoke? Which I smoked cigarettes at that time, okay? Marlboro cigarettes, all right? So he said yes. And the thing was, the car was immaculate. And in retrospect, it was it was a government-issued car. So I slipped down in the passenger seat, sort of like slouched down, sort of relaxing and sort of like trying to assess the situation. Okay. Now it starts getting weird. Okay. Under the dashboard, okay, is a reel-to-reel tape recorder. Small one, right? I just went, oh. Running. I just went, oh, fuck. What is this? Okay, I'd seen a lot of stuff, but that one, I hadn't seen that one before, right? So, so I just sort of went, whoa, boy, next coffee stop, I'm out of here, man. So, I don't want to find out more literary content or not. This is enough. Okay, so I flip open, the side ashtray on the door, okay? A little ashtray, I flip it open, okay. Now it gets movie time bizarre, okay? Because I can't explain really what happened. Obviously, I got hit somehow by a knockout drug. But what I thought happened next, and what I see in my mind's eye, okay, because that's the last coherent observation I had for the next 5 years. Okay, dig that. What I see is a needle coming out of the ashtray. Now the mind is going, and the mind's going, that's crazy, man. Needles don't come out of ashtrays. Okay, and I'm out. Okay. Now the rest of this is like just scattershot. Okay, my head was picking up like sort of like, screen goes black, okay, and then it becomes light for a little bit, and it's a little bizarre, and then it goes black again, and my body, I'm weak like a kitten. I'm drugged. I'm zero. Okay, so I'm just raising consciousness when I come out of the black. Okay, but what I remember is it's now nighttime. It's raining, and then panic.
Still in the car.
Still in the car. Although I look over the guy and I never got it clear. Again, this is really, what it was sort of like. Is that the same guy? And so, but what's important and what really happened was like behind it, total panic attack. Okay, because it was sort of like, oh fuck, what is going on? Okay. Out again. Okay. Come to highway sign. Okay. Virginia, Maryland. Okay. I know I went to Maryland. Okay. There's a place called Fort Detrick, Maryland, which is significant to the FBI, the CIA, and U.S. Army intelligence. Mucho. Okay. I don't know if that's where I was taken. Okay. But I remember
also the Edgewood Arsenal.
Yeah, right. I went out again. Okay. And I came to. I'm starting to get tension in just remembering all this. Anyway, I came to, and it's not a thing that leaves you. And I came to, And now it even gets like, Alfred Hitchcock movie-ish, okay? It's still raining at night, which is perfect scenario, right? But this is not fiction, kids. This is reality. I write fiction, but this stuff really happened, okay? No doubt, okay? So I come to, and there's an MP, okay, comes to the window.
An MP, an army?
Military police.
Personnel.
Okay. Military police comes out of a little thing, comes to the thing. They go through some gyrations. We enter this place. I remember, I don't know why I was going in and out, to tell you the truth. And although I was barely coming out, okay. We then drive down into a basement driving thing, and the door swings open. Okay. Next thing, 2 guys are walking me up a back staircase, out again, sort of like a ward place. And the interesting that I've never been able to follow through in all of the research I've done years and years of research on this stuff, is like the feeling that I got, okay, was like, oh shit, there's other people here. Okay, and like, so the research that I've sort of tried to get is like, nursing staff, dietitians, whatever, or, okay, but, okay, out again. Now, the significant part of this, I don't know how long I was there. My feeling is it was a couple of days, at most a week. The reason is that, you got to understand, at that particular time, I wasn't following, newspapers or calendars, and I didn't wear a watch, and et cetera, but, it was summertime, okay, and it was still summertime, okay, so maybe it was a week, maybe it was a couple of weeks, okay, one of the other projects, by the way, was implants. They also were, but I don't believe that was the thing that they did to me, okay, because I believe that I got hit with a drug. I was given a drug. Okay. I do not know, with all of the requests, I have files and pages and pages of freedom of information requests, of letters to senators, of letters to congressmen, of letters to every significant journalist that you can think of, okay, to lawyers, to lawyer associations. Believe me, when I thanked you for having courage for having me on, that's heartfelt, okay? And so, I don't know what I was given, and I don't know how long I was there, okay.
Like, did you just have a sense that other people were there, or did you actually meet eye contact with people?
It was sort of like bunk beds, and people are sort of like stretched out, like sort of like, Wipeout City type of, recuperation ward, and I just got walked through there, okay? But that's the only they must have hit me, so that, I can only assume, maybe somebody said, well, you didn't give them enough, yeah, and then I was gone, okay? So, or they erased my memory, I don't know, open-ended conjecture, I don't know what the hell went on there, it's more than a little bit of curiosity to me. But anyway, so, I then start having some conscious memory of what happens next. Okay, which okay, I've been there obviously for some time, and I'm now in a cafeteria. Okay, it's an empty cafeteria. There's 2 guys, more in suits, government straight hours in suits. They walk me down, it's like an open cafeteria. They walk me down, they're getting coffee, right? Then we walk back to a table, and I remember the guy was eating a muffin, and one of them shoved the muffin under my nose, and he said, "Here, you want a bite?" And the other guy said, "Hey, leave him alone." And then I'm out again. I'm in a car, different car, sunny out, okay, highway, Pennsylvania.
We'll be back with the second half of this in the series of Mind Control on CKLN.
I then start having some conscious memory of what happens next. Okay, which okay, I've been there obviously for some time, and I'm now in a cafeteria. Okay, it's an empty cafeteria. There's two guys, more in suits, government straight arrows in suits. They walk me down, it's like an open cafeteria. They walk me down, they're getting coffee, right? Then we walk back to a table, and I remember the guy was eating a muffin, and one of them shoved the muffin under my nose, and he said, "Here, you want a bite?" And the other guy said, "Hey, leave him alone." And then I'm out again. I'm in a car, different car, sunny out, okay, highway, Pennsylvania. Okay, I mean, if you follow the map, if you start from Indiana, you can see the highways that they took. Okay, Pennsylvania. It's a different driver. Again, a gray, nondescript, nothing in it car. I mean, like just empty, clean car. So. Then another bit of weirdness. This is just, which is also so interesting because it just seems that operationally in some aspects of this they were just flying by the seat of their pants. Okay, which was even more there was compounded to panic, right? So the thing was, I remember I'm looking at this guy, and now I'm starting to get unwoozy. Okay, but. Well, I'll get into the state of my mind, okay, because it's really big. As I say, this screwed up my head for 5 years. But the thing was that I start coming around, okay, and I look over at this guy, and he really scared me. It was like, I mean, I hate using, fiery rhetoric, but this looked like SS, true believer, right? I mean, and...
train killer.
Yeah, right, And so, it's just like, oh, fuck. And so he pulls off the highway, okay? And he pulls into this like sort of hardware gas station, thing. And there's a phone there. And he gets out of the phone booth. And I'm starting to come, and I'm just really thankful that I'm starting to get. So, I mean, I can even start moving my hand, and I can see, like, oh, wow, what? What? And so there was a lot of what? I mean, if you don't believe it, believe me, I didn't believe it. Believe me, I didn't believe it, okay? So, I mean, I seriously thought I was losing my mind, okay? That's, definitely part of the thing, really. So, I mean, you got to understand, at that point, I still didn't believe that the U.S. government would do things to the, that they were good guys. They didn't do things to, I'm an American, I mean, blah, blah, blah. I mean, even if I'm a protester, hippie, they wouldn't do this, I mean, blah, blah, blah. So, anyway, this guy gets out of the car, he goes to the phone, and I see him, he's talking on the phone. And I'm thinking, like... You're asking them what to do with me? You don't know. So I got very frightened. I mean, what happens if they come back?
You
and
were
they
able to overhear what he was saying?
No, I just get the feeling, what is he, I mean, and he comes out, and I just, I got terrorized. I mean, well, terror is terror. I mean, I was in a state of total terror at this point. And I just sort of figured from the look that I got on this guy, that, like, if they say, kill him, boom, and so which can get you really annoyed, like having some, being put in that position, once you get yourself back on your feet. Anyway, so this guy gets in the car, and he takes me out to the highway and dumps me, like a bad movie, boom, on the highway,
Just open the door and kick
Open
it.
it, open the door, bloop, and I roll over out of the highway, and he's off. Okay, skirting the pebbles back in my face, and bloop, back on the highway, and I'm there. And I was just like, oh man, right? And I remember the sun, and I remember looking at the green of the grass, and just thinking it was all beautiful, and then saying like, okay, can I stand? Okay, can I stand? Okay, and I struggled to my feet. Okay, that was not easy to do, but I did stand up, okay, which I was really happy about, okay. And I took a deep breath, and then I sort of tried to assess what was happening. And, because I couldn't put it together. This didn't match, or anything, all right. So I said to two things came into my mind, just two real clear, instructive, survival mechanisms, okay? Don't tell anyone, okay? Because if you go and tell somebody what just happened, okay, they're going to lock you up in a loony bin. You ain't ever coming out, okay? So find out what happened. See, you can walk, get your head together, because I started trying to think. It was impossible. And let me just say the second thing, and then I'll try and explain the headspace, okay? The second thing that came into my mind, which was very good information from my mind to tell me, don't tell anybody. I mean, keep your mouth shut, because that's what it would have happened. I mean, this is crazy business, especially, none of the, this was before, pre-Watergate, okay, So, anyway, the other thing was get back to New York, okay. I knew I was close to Philadelphia because I saw the highway sign. Get back to New York, get back to the village, get back to the Lower East Side, get below 14th Street in Alphabet City, and see your friends, okay, and get yourself together, okay. So that's what I was doing, okay. Now, aside from total weakness, okay, because, I was really as weak as a kitten, was like, I was standing up, and I just had my hand, sort of half hung out, right? Which, let me, it wasn't the mind that I had for the next 5 years, okay. Abstract painting, that's the only way that I can describe it is two ways. It's sort of abstract painting where a platform doesn't have an end and then it ends, and it goes into another geometric shape that just nothing. Everything was sort of liquid, okay, and the only way that I can describe it further is like it was sort of like there was a logical thinking process, okay, that the plot line would drop out of, okay, and it would just be bump. It would be like being in a bumpy elevator, okay, that didn't stop for about 5 years, okay. It was like, so the logical connections, it was just the ability to think, which it's perfect, if as a counter-interventionist technique. If you want to jail or knock off or put the people who are opposing your power structure, and you want to like put them out of commission for a while, boy, whatever drug they gave me, boy, that would do it. So I guess they learned something. But anyway, glad they learned something. But anyway, so the thing was the only other way that I could describe it, because I'll continue with getting off the highway, because there's a bit more that's a bit interesting about that, was to describe the unhappiness and the anguish that this was I was living in the street at that time. The shape that I was in is some guy that you pass on a corner, and it's dirty and bedraggled, and his clothes are just yuck, and he's mumbling to himself, and he's like, he's out of his mind. That was me. Okay? So, don't tell anybody made sense. I mean, because, I was out of my mind. But part of me was very solid. I was trying to get, I was trying to repatch all of this stuff that kept on falling apart, right?
Namely,
so
the reality
my mind,
around you.
yeah, right, or my mind's perception of the reality
Right.
around me, yeah. So anyway, there was one night because I was wandering the streets, and I was barefoot, and I had eaten some food out of a garbage can, and I found myself rubbing my hands against the brick wall of a bank until they were bleeding and causing me pain, and that's when I knew to stop because my palms were starting to bleed. And I was saying, "Here, take my blood, but give me back my mind." Okay. Anyway,
So that just must have been a horrifying experience, because at that point you really didn't know what was done to you, whether
No.
it was just the drugs or something
Right,
else, or what combination of
no,
drugs and where it
didn't
was
have
going.
a handle on nothing.
And it didn't seem to end.
No. And all my friends left me, and I mean, there was no support mechanism because I had been a very solid person. I mean, I was a person that people looked forward to talking to and gathering around, right? And, I could see them talking, like, what happened to him? And then finally people became disgusted with me. So, I just, it was a nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, just to get
Sure.
a frame of reference here, what year was this that this happened?
Okay. This was the late 60s, let's say around 69, okay?
Summer of 69.
Yeah, because I came to Canada in the later part of 71. Let me get off the highway, and then we'll get to coming to Canada, okay? Because there's two incidents here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's not only the drugging, but it's the second time I was screwed up.
Yep.
This happened in the Nixon administration. The second time I was screwed up was under Ronald Wilson Reagan, okay? Okay.
We'll get into that later.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. Okay, so anyway, I'm on the highway, and it's almost cliche, but I mean sometimes life is almost like a cliche. This hippie van stops. I mean the van is painted, and these hardcore hippies are in the van, right? And they say, "Hey, get in, man," And and there's this very nice couple who's the most together of the grouping in this van, and they're in the front, and they start talking to me, and I'm just lying in the back, right? And they were so wonderful. I want to thank them again if they even hear this. But the woman looked at me, and then she looked at her boyfriend, and she said, "This guy's in trouble, man. Let's take him home." And so they took me to their they had a house, and they took me to the house, and they gave me a bath, and they gave me some fresh clothes to wear, and gave me something to eat, and I wasn't talking very much, and she said to me, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to New York City." She said, "We'll buy you a bus ticket, man. You're in no shape, okay?" And so they drove me to downtown Philadelphia, and we had a cup of coffee together, and then they bought me this bus ticket, and I went back to New York, which was really quite nice.
Have you seen them since?
No. So anyway, I mean that was part of what, as I say, there was actually a sense of community being established.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to New York, and then through 5 years of travail, what happened was there was one friend, he had been politically active with me, and then he had left the States, and he had gone to Montreal, and I don't know, I was trying everything. I mean, it was getting a little better, like at one point I got better enough. Oh God, I was living in a mission, and I got a job as a warehouseman, and so I got some money, right? And, I mean, like, I was really quiet and into myself, just, like testing the waters of, and so I went up to Montreal, and I mean, everybody who knew me, just, it was sort of like, oh, yeah, oh, righty. They was sort of like, I guess they assumed like I had a bad drug trip, which I had, but I didn't give it to myself. This guy said, well, you should leave the States, man. I mean, at that point, peace, love was no more, and the cities were burning, and the Watts was going on in Detroit and Harlem, and I mean, it was just, and you had the assassinations. I mean, it was just like, whole bunches of stuff. And so, which I no longer was, couldn't keep two things in my head together.
This is still like just a couple of years after?
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh no, I was off the chessboard, politically as an activist, unquote, So, anyway, he said, well, you should come up to Canada. I said, yeah, okay. He said, it's sane up here, So I said, okay. So I moved up to Montreal, and then Montreal was going through a great bit of upheaval about French and English, which I didn't know a hell of a lot when I first got, across the border into Montreal, and it was sort of like, oh, what did you invite me up here? What, a political environment? What are you? And he said, no, look, go out to British Columbia, man. There's woods, there's trees, okay? The thing to keep in mind, okay, was later I got solidly back together, okay? Later I was working as a copywriter on a radio station. I had a rented farm situation, and I was back on my feet. Okay, I had chickens, and
out in BC still.
Out in BC, right? Okay, I had put in a garden. I mean, it's a healthy environment. You chop wood, you go swimming, you go skinny dipping in the lake and watch a falcon for a while. I mean, it's a good way to
live.
Yeah. So anyway. I was doing that, and so when I got myself back together again,
after spending
5 years of not being so, then I met a woman and fell in love with her, and she had been politically active. I mean, like she was a student activist and had tanks in the streets and had been a medic during some of the riots in Madison, Wisconsin. She had bicycled across the country, and I met her, and anyway, so we got married, okay, and I was with my wife for 2 or 3 years, and I hadn't told anybody, okay. I had put it out of my mind, okay. I had gone back to being a writer, okay. I hadn't thought about it. I mean, it was just like, forget about it, okay? And it was a pleasure to forget about it, okay? And so one night, my wife was holding me, and I was shaking and crying and really going through terror again. And I told her about what had happened. And she was really, really very strong. She said, well, Ron, you're a writer, right? I said, yes. She said, write about it. I said, okay. So that was the first writing of what's come to be Transgressions, okay. But no, I up until I started writing about it. Okay, it was just cathartic, and healthy. There was still the basic, robotic instructions I had given myself at the roadside, which was, don't tell anybody; they're just going to think you're nuts, and get yourself together. Okay, so I guess at the point where I felt strong enough that, yeah, okay, knock on wood together, which leads me to all of the research that I've done about MK Ultra itself.
Right.
Okay.
So let's talk about that. What after deciding that you were going to write about it, what avenues of did you pursue trying to find out what happened to you?
Okay. I've read all of the Senate hearings works. I've also read, I believe, every book that's been written, and there's been some fine work by different writers on MK Ultra. Okay. And given myself all of that background, I also since I'm a fiction writer, that's what I am. I mean, I've had to become a switch hitter in the sense of having worked for ad agencies and newspapers and trade journals, and I even have my own consulting business as a writer. Perfect Communications is the name of my consulting business. But I know how to do other types of writing. Okay, but I am a fiction writer. Okay, so I thought that the best medium to doing this was to write it as a work of fiction. And the thing was, I didn't think that just a first-person story would really give a full picture of what was going on there. So what I've also done is research Sidney Gottlieb. He had a very nice farm. He used to like to milk goats. And he was, by the way, Sidney Gottlieb, it was a very interesting synchronicity, who was in charge of the CIA's, mind control experiment, where a Jew who's from the Bronx, just like me, a Jew from the Bronx, right? I mean, perfect, right? Anyway, I mean, him and I, would have had a fist fight, I believe, after school if I had ever met this son of a bitch. Anyway, the thing was, I shouldn't get back to my Bronx shtick. The thing was, I've also researched all of the people involved so that, some of the characters in my book, since we'll get into the second half of it, is Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, Oliver North, Tom Charles Houston, who was Tom Charles Houston is a fascinating little doohickey because he was Nixon's young guy, okay, who also came from Indianapolis, right? And the thing is that I've done research on the individuals involved, okay, and so I wrote a work of fiction, okay, which very interestingly, because I really do have a rather large talent, and I say that without an ego. I mean, it's a gift, and I've been blessed with it, okay? Interestingly, this book has had such difficulty in getting published, you see. But because it's the interlock, it's the corporate interlock. I mean, it's just, it goes on forever. But anyway, so, the story that I wrote is fiction, but it's based on the factual data.
So during this time that you were trying to get information about MK Ultra and specifically what happened to you, what program that you were involved in, what kind of response were you getting from the government? You were making Freedom of Information requests. How much information were they giving you?
Okay.
How much was blacked out?
Okay. The interesting thing is I've gone through different administrations, okay? I mean, gone through the Carter administration, okay? Ford, Carter, Reagan, Bush, and now Clinton, okay? So there'd almost be 4 or 5 different answers to that, okay? The Carter administration, because basically nothing happened until Carter came in. Okay, now I don't know if everything that happened during the Carter administration was what using those fellows' terminologies was a limited hangout, but which means tell them a bunch of phony baloney stuff that'll keep them occupied, and we'll keep the good stuff to ourselves, But I mean, Colby, the guy who just died. I try to stick to the facts. If I don't know it for sure, I'm not going to throw around accusations. He was the head of the CIA at that point. Let's just make something clear, okay, about that, because that's really the egregious lack of. Because my main thrust in all of this, okay, is to achieve two things: truth and justice. Okay, believe me, I have gone through a desire for revenge. Okay, that was hell on earth. Okay, and I believe that, thank God, I have worked out my desire for revenge. Okay, but I don't think it's possible to put this to rest for myself without truth or justice being established. Okay, so during Carter's time and the hearings that went on, I mean, Carter came on and he said, "I'm not going to tell you any lies." You had, and I mean that's what he claimed. Okay, so while he had the largest defense budget, even bigger than Reagan's increase, as far as I understand, but nonetheless. Nice cop, bad cop, But anyway, Jimmy's a nice guy. He builds houses for poor people. Right. Okay. So anyway, during that period, there was information being released. Now, I sent off a lot of freedom of information requests. There's basic strategy that I work having now. I mean, I write a great freedom of information request letter, but I've done it often enough. But the first of all, you get denied. Okay, then you go through that whole thing. I mean, the basic thing that the game they sort of operate on is like, you want something, tell me where it is, and I'll go look for it. And so it's sort of like which in a way I shouldn't. I mean, if you're gonna, because there's been some very helpful, good people in the libraries in the government as well. Okay. I mean, there's all sorts of folk who work for government, and there's been people who've really tried to help me. The thing is, they're working with a big. I mean, there were lots of covert activities and lots of documentation. So even if you want to get stuff for somebody, to some degree, you got to know what are you talking about and what do you want me to look for. Okay, so stuff that came out during that period was first. The most reassuring thing that came out during the Carter administration I mean, without me going to the files and dragging all that stuff out, is that, oh, thank God, okay, I'm not nuts. Okay?
And you're not alone.
I'm not alone. This really happened. They're really, I mean, like, okay.
Good morning. You've tuned in to the International Connection here on CKLN 88.1. We are in week number 8 of a radio series about mind control. Today we are listening to part 2 of the story of Ronald Howard Cohen, a writer and activist who was abducted by CIA and U.S. military and severely drugged as part of Project MK Ultra. He has pursued finding out why this has happened and attempted to get some justice. We will hear his story of writing a book about his ordeal and the government's interference in suppressing the book from being published. Now, Ronald Howard Cohen.
The most reassuring thing that came out during the Carter administration I mean, without me going to the files and dragging all that stuff out, is that, oh, thank God, okay, I'm not nuts. Okay?
And you're not alone.
I'm not alone. This really happened. They're really, I mean, like, okay. So that, I mean, like that was something, that was solid. Okay. So that was good. Okay. Now, the next turn of events, which was very large, was Ronald Reagan, which, please, I ask you, to control me if I start getting angry and annoyed at Mr. Reagan. I would like to stay even-toned. But the thing is, with Reagan, what had been done was there was more, the intelligence community was very upset because Carter put in a bunch of lawyers, okay? And he said, look, you guys got to deal with a bunch of stuff, but before you go out and do this stuff, run it through with these guys, okay? So from what I understand, I mean, you know, the ego of the people involved in all of that is like, we'll do whatever the hell we really want, you know, and so the thing is, they you know, Carter got out, right? And I'm sorry, this all makes me a bit nervous. Carter got out, and Reagan got in. Okay, now there was a very good article in a magazine called The Progressive. Okay, which I remember the title of it was, and I was back in New York at that time. Okay, was Back in the Saddle Again. Okay, and what Reagan said to them was like, you know, like, look, Carter hung you up. Hey, whatever you want, you know, write your tickets. You know, when you sent in requests on the Freedom of Information Act, and to understand my reason that also I try to establish a personal relationship with the librarian who's answering the ad thing, and also when I write to senators or stuff like that, you know, or Congress people, you know, I not only write to their Washington office, but I write to their state office. Right? I mean, like, you know, you're doing your job, you got to get elected every couple of years, you know, do your job. Anyway, I mean, I was raised by a union politician in New York City, right? From the plumbers union, you know. Anyway, so the thing is that Reagan, when you sent in for requests then, forget it, you know, no such, you know, forget it. You didn't get any information, okay?
Were you able to get a significant amount of information
significant
through
enough
Carter,
for, and Reagan and Bush and through it all, and also I'm a damn good researcher, okay, and I'm also persistent as hell, okay, and I'll go eyeball to eyeball. So the thing was, I went back to I was divorced, and I was having the book Transgression was written, okay, and it covered the drugging. Okay, I had written this out, and I knew from having lived in New York, okay, because when I was a young bohemian living in New York, I knew, like, hey, man, you want to get published, which parties do you get invited to? You know, who do you know? You know, okay. So, you know, 57th Street and 5th Avenue, I've been uptown, you know, and so, anyway, so I knew, like, hey, you want to get published, go move back to New York. Okay, so I moved back to New York and got an agent in New York, and the agent is very interesting. I was very flattered. She was an older woman, and one of her clients, she knew many famous, influential people, and she had an office on Park Avenue. But one of the people who had been her client was an author named Upton Sinclair, who had written a book during that was called The Jungle, which was about the meatpacking industry in Chicago. Very working class writer, or working class writer. Basically, that's my orientation from a literary point of view. Is basically working class novelist. But that's a whole other discussion. So I had the agent, and the book was going around New York. So, you know, I had to get my day job. I mean, you know, you have to, you know, survive as an artist in this society. Okay, so what had happened? All of a sudden, this is very interesting stuff. What happens, by the way, is I start getting mail from CISPAS. Okay. CISPAS. Yeah, the committee I mean, Nicaragua was going on.
El Salvador.
Yeah, El Salvador. Okay, I didn't attend meetings. I was very functional in New York. Okay, I was like, I was just taking care of business, coming in from Canada, getting an agent, getting my book published, and I was going to get back to Canada. My stuff. I had moved out of Canada, but my stuff was in a small town in Vermont, in a storage facility in Vermont called Brattleboro, Vermont, and that was all my belongings. And I went back down to New York City and was living in Chelsea, which is around the 23rd Street West Side area, and I was very cautious. Okay. I mean, like, New York is heavy turf, okay? And you gotta know what you're doing, and you gotta just take care of business and just stay very focused and centered, okay? So I knew that, I knew what I was doing. I watched my behind.
So at this point, the book had been completely written?
The book was written.
Right.
It was at an agent. It was being shown around to publishing houses. Okay.
And then, just to clarify, all of your manuscripts, all your documentation...
Everything. Now we're talking 25 years worth of work is stored along with everything else that a person, my pots and pans and et cetera, everything, my sheets and towels, and everything else is stored up in a storage facility. But all of the writing is in cardboard cartons and 2 trunks. There's quite a bit of writing. In Brattleboro, Vermont, okay? And, I mean, I was sort of tentative, I basically felt like, no, I want to be back in Canada, but, well, if really New York works out, well, maybe I'll go back there, but, no, I just keep it here, and then I'll get settled, and then I'll come back to Canada. I'd rather be there. Okay. So I have documentation from landed immigrancy and citizenship and all that from both countries, okay? So, anyway, thing is that I'm there. Now, what this leads into is I had 2 mind-blowing, for lack of better terminology, and that's very adequate terminology, setup situations. Okay, here I am in New York, looking for the day job while my agent is trying to peddle my work about covert operations of the FBI, the CIA, and U.S. Army intelligence.
On U.S. citizens.
On U.S. citizens. Well, I tell you, Joe reads this, and he calls up Sam, and Sam calls up Harriet, and they say, who the hell is Ronald Howard Cohen, and what is this book all about? Okay? Okay.
These are the publishers you're talking about.
I'm talking about what, from my understanding of operations of the intelligence community, okay, is that they're in all avenues of the corporate, military, industrial, corporate interlock, okay?
Including media.
I mean, everything, okay, including the New York Times, which we'll get to, but the thing is that, like, what you do is, like, if you want people to know what's what, you train them, and you say, very nice, go back to your job, or go goodbye, and then they go and they become literary agents, or they become editors at book publishers, or they become, I don't know, whatever, field of endeavor they are, okay? But if there's anyone who wants to know, I mean, that's why, you have to be very cautious about what you're doing, and that's really based, I mean, I've never been trained on the farm. I mean, I don't know. This is all basically, like, somewhat based on factual, but still conjecture, in the sense that, like, I don't really know what goes on, but it's just that, like, if there's somebody who's functioning, in this profession, oh, well, you got that person at that port, who you can, find out, whatever the hell you want. So anyway, I was working temporary agencies, okay, and temporary office work, in New York to see how quickly the book would sell. Okay, and then I'd beat it out of there. Okay, so I was doing my day job. Okay, so now the thing that's important to me from a personal point of view is here I've done all of this documentation, but up until that point I had never had any contact by any other person who had had this done to them, okay, or anything similar done to them. I had never had it confirmed, from an authoritative source, which the setup situations did confirm, that this all occurred, okay. So I was on pretty flimsy ground in a lot of ways. What I had was answers from my Freedom of Information requests and other books that I read and research and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, I go to this real estate management office. Okay, I get a temporary job. And I have some bookkeeping and accounting clerical skills. Okay. And so I get a job on 6th or 7th Avenue, around 45th, 46th Street, right in the center of near New York, the Times Square. And it's in this, high office building, and it's for a real estate management company. Okay. So, put on my suit, go do the 9 to 5 gig. Okay. So I come into this place. And there's this guy. I mean, such a cliche. He looks a heavy-set guy, very intellectual, smoking a pipe, with a beard, and he talks to me for a while. And it's like we talked for about an hour and a half. I haven't done any work, And he's telling me about how he has a girlfriend who's in Russia. I mean, and what do I care? But they're paying me. What do I care? Okay, so. Then we go into the boardroom, okay? Some company, this lovely boardroom, lovely big table, comfortable leather plush chairs, right? Nice, okay? So and there's coffee in the back and there's drinks out there. It's very nice. Right? Sit down, okay? And these two guys come in, okay? There's stacks of paper in there, right? So the guy who lead me in and had been talking to me for an hour and a half, he said, "Oh, these guys, they've been here for a while. They're temporary staff. They'll tell you what to do." Fine. So
this is again your first day on the job.
First day on the job. Okay. So they look at each other and they sit down, and he says, "Oh, you just check those boxes." So I start checking these boxes, and then one sits at the head of the table, one sits at his right-hand side, and I'm down the table a little bit on the left-hand side of the table, okay? And I'm working away, and they're not really working, okay? So I look up at them, and the guy who's sitting at the head of the table, he says, "You don't have to do that shit anymore." I said, "What?" He said, "Don't worry, you get paid for it." I said, "What?" I said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm with the FBI." I said, "Oh, no shit." And again, a chill, a little nervous there. This is not your common, average, everyday experience, right? And I look at the other guy and I say, "And who are you with, the CIA?" And he goes, "Uh-huh." Okay. So they look at me and they say, "Look, don't get nervous, okay? We just want to talk." So I said, "Uh-huh. What are we going to talk about?" Okay. So he said, "Well, look, the guy at the head of the table, this is very interesting. He said, I'm from New Orleans, and I came up here to talk with you, and the other guy, he didn't say where he was from, okay? The fellow from the CIA. Oh no, I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, and you?" And he said, yeah, this is very interesting. He said, "Oh, I'm an actor as well, I said, CIA? He said, yeah, but I'm an actor. I said, really? He said, yeah, I didn't get a part in Witness. You remember that there was a movie, it was a commercial movie about, I think I saw half of it one Sunday afternoon about Quakers or something. There was somebody who knew an undercover operation and,
Latin America.
Or something, And he said, I didn't get a part in that, Fantastic. What do I know? So, and he said to me, the guy from CIA, he said, no, we just met, He's pointing to the guy from the FBI. So they're working out their relationship here, but they've told me, they've identified themselves, okay?
Do they identify themselves by name? Do they give you a name? Or?
Oh, they gave me a name, okay? And I started scribbling stuff down, okay? And then I saw them watching me, and I said, scribble when you get out of here, okay? So they said, I said, what do you want to talk about? And meanwhile, I'm not only outraged, okay, but I'm really fucking nervous, okay? I mean, I have never had this happen to me before, okay? And, I mean, it's just like, whoa, I mean, I wasn't prepared for it, it was sort of like, whoa. So I sort of felt like, I just want to get the hell out of here. Can I get the hell out of here, all right? So, so I didn't know. I mean, maybe, who the hell knows? Maybe they were going to abduct me a second time. What the hell did I know? So, the thing was, the guy said, well, maybe we can work something out. I said, maybe we can work something out? And he said, yeah, well, you have a book out. I said, how the hell do you know? And they both looked at me and said, oh, come on. It's like, what? You only think your phone stops. Your phone stops. Come on. So, I got up and I said, look, I got to think about this, okay? I'm going home, okay? I'm going to be here tomorrow, okay? I relived the anxiety, I said, you both will be here tomorrow? And they said, oh yeah, and you can go home. And you'll be paid for the full day. And you can come in tomorrow. And we'll be here. I said, okay, because I want to think about this. I said, okay. Okay. So I left there, okay. And I got home. And I had a cup of mint tea. I didn't trust myself having a scotch. But I had a cup of mint tea, which was supposed to mellow me out. And I put some calming music on, right? And it was very interesting. I called up the temporary agency that had sent me to this job, right? And I said, I just came from this job, Really strange thing happened at this job. And the woman said, what was that? I said, well, these two guys, they identified themselves as being from the U.S. government. And she said, right out of her lips, she said, they told you what we do? And, and then she was like, oh, and it was like, end the conversation, And she said, are you going back? I said, well, I'm thinking about it. And so I hung up the phone. I said, righty, welcome to Big League Baseball. So I went and I took a walk, and I came back, and I said, far out. Okay, let's do the game, okay? So I took out my tape recorder, okay? And didn't dress in my suit the second go around. Put on more my dungaree tough guy outfit and I was going to be paid for it anyway, and I didn't have to work. They just wanted to talk to me. The hell with that shit, And I went uptown, okay, and I came into the boardroom, and they're both sitting there, okay, in their suits, and And by the way, these guys look like anybody else. Okay? Yeah. They just look like anybody. Okay? They're sitting there, and I don't remember the conversation word for word, but at one point, this really, like was a mind blower to me. At one point, and I guess I was being glib and trying to find a basis of taking it seriously, right? And so this one guy, he says to me, he says, like, a dialogue which I wouldn't write. I mean, but he says to me, he says, well, what do you want? I said, what do you mean, what do I want? And he says, well, your book isn't going to get published. And they just sort of like looked at me like, oh, grow up. And I sort of looked at them and I said, oh yeah? How about a job at the New York Times? So they looked at each other and I was like, that's all he wants. No problem, Jim, we got a deal, And I looked at them and I stood up and I said, okay, I mean, in the back of my mind, because I really write better scripts than this. I just sort of say, okay, you want me to play Robert Redford? I'll play Robert Redford here, okay? I said, hey, no. Listen, you stupid son of a bitches, I'll tell you what I want, okay? I want truth and justice, okay? And next, both of you, I want both of you to go take a flying fuck at the moon, okay? And I'm out of here. And you can send the fucking check, okay? So I walked out of there. Oh. So the important thing to keep in mind is I had, to them crossed the line, right? I mean, like I got into them macho, I think, right? And here, they wanted to make me a deal that I couldn't refuse, And here, I'm being a wise ass, and, and on top of it, telling them to go fuck themselves, So they got to teach me a lesson, right? I mean, this is what, I summarize, okay? New York City, the book's out, at my agent, trying to get published. I'm back in my apartment. I've had the one setup situation in an office, and I did get paid, by the way, for 2 full days. Okay? And, I mean, they're good with the money, So,
after you told them to take a hike, did they try to contact you in any way immediately after that?
Yeah. Dig this. Okay. Because, actually, there were 3 setup situations, all right? I'm really rushing things. The anxiety, I sort of...
Let's talk about this first one.
Yeah, all right. The second one, I'm back in New York. I get in touch with my editor, my agent. I say, how things going? She said, well, I went out to a couple of houses, but it came back. She said, I still want to work with it. I said, okay. I've got to work day jobs, while doing that, And she said, well, that's all right. You won't be the first. I said, all righty. So I said, oh, I've had enough with the suit and tie routine here. Okay. So I got a job working in the garment district in a warehouse, packing crap in a warehouse, okay, packing different leather goods, imported leather goods, in a warehouse in the garment district, which is in the 30s between 7th and 9th Avenue in Manhattan, okay. So the day I arrive, again, it's a temporary service, but this is like, manual labor temporary. Okay, so I got my work boots on and my sweatshirt, and I'm doing manual labor in the warehouse. Okay, there were 6 or 7 other temporary help, all black. The intelligence community hires people from all different types of groups. and they arrive in the warehouse. Okay. So now we come to death threat time, by the way, kids. So I'm working in the warehouse, and it's lunchtime, okay? And I'm trying to, like, maintain my cool, just sort of feeling like, I don't know, okay, if the agent's doing the book around, like maybe I should just go back up to Vermont and get the hell out of, the country, but I'll get some money from this gig. Maybe I won't pay rent next month, and I'll just split. Okay?
So how long after the first set of situation is this?
Oh, right away. I mean, New York, you don't have money. You can't run out of money in New York, man. You got to stay on the ball.
Days.
Yeah. You got to rebound quick. Okay. So it's lunchtime. Okay. Got to take my brown bag and my thermos, and I go off in the corner, and I'm having lunch, right? And there was this fellow, small type fellow, 5'4", lightweight, powerful, strong, no fat on him. And he had mentioned about the Marines, and like it's just like, I was unloading trucks and, blah, 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 and they talk. Right? So I'm eating my lunch, and he comes and sits down. He says, "Can we talk?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I came from Hawaii to talk with you." I said, "Oh, fuck." I said, "Who are you with?" He said, "U.S. Army Intelligence." I said, "Shit." So he said, "Hey, man, let's stay cool, it's okay, just want to talk, we want to talk about, Indianapolis, and Indiana." So here was the first time solid confirmation, okay? I really wasn't nuts. It really happened, okay?
The others didn't mention that incident at all?
No, they just
about
mentioned
your book.
about the book.
Right.
Yeah. And so I said, "Look, I don't think I want to talk to you, okay? I told you what I wanted, truth and justice. I don't think I'm going to get that by talking with you. You hip?" And so he said, "Uh-huh." He said, I've got somebody to report to, okay? So I said, "Okay, look, you got to do your trip, man, but I'm telling you, okay, I don't think I got anything to talk to you folks about, okay? I've written it all out, okay? And I told you what I wanted, okay, truth and justice, and I said, just leave me alone. I just want to do this job. I want to get the money. I'm leaving New York, okay?" And so he got up. He said, "Okay." He said, "Do eat your lunch. Bye." Okay. Well, this fellow was not alone. The other fellows, now it didn't matter whether they had to cover their cover any longer, okay? It was a little more out in the open while we were unloading and unloading the trucks, okay? And this got more like, football locker room, okay? Type of, subtle dialogue, with the boxes going back and forth, okay? And we're going up, it's the end of the day, about 4 o'clock, we're going up a back elevator, wooden elevator, creaking up, old elevator with all the boxes. You've unloaded it from, or you unloaded it from, so you're squeezed up against this, the wood panels in the wood elevator, and all the boxes are there, and we're going to unload that, and then we go home, okay? Or put that in the warehouse, we've unloaded it from the truck, take it up to the warehouse, and then we have to, shelve it, and then get the hell out of here. So, okay. I'm going up, and you see, because I didn't know really what these guys wanted, okay? I think the feeling I got from them was like, "Look, we sent you the businessmen, the nice guys, what you want to see, like, we got other guys, all right." So,
So did you feel all of your coworkers at that time were keeping an eye on you?
Absolutely, they absolutely, all 7 of them. Yeah, absolutely. not only all 7 of them, but I felt that the people at the company, okay, that we almost had a choice whether we wanted to work or not, and that they had been that had gone up the chain of command inside that firm, and had been told that something like this was going to go on, okay, and because the managers were civilians, if I can use that term, but it was obvious, like, I mean, there were times when these guys and I were just talking, like we weren't doing any work. I mean, if it was really a legitimate gig, somebody would have come in over and said, like, hey, you're getting paid, get back to work, I mean, that's not what happened. We had the run of the place, Yeah. One morning I came in, and this guy, we hadn't started working as yet, and he said, hey, Ron, you ever hear of G. Gordon Liddy? Well, I said, oh, yeah, I think I heard of that dude. That was the guy who busted Leary on acid the first time, right, up in Millbrook. I knew some people who used to hang out with Leary, He said, oh, yeah, G. Gordon, man. You think it's true, like, and he lit his lighter, right? He said, you think it's true, like he put his hand over the flame, and then he shut it on. He was going to show me that he could do it also and burn his flesh, We're riding up in this elevator. You see, I'm avoiding saying this story. Get through this story, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. These 2 guys in the back, and I didn't know if they were putting me on and just having fun, with the jerk, But one of them says, what do you think of that license to kill shit? And the other one says, oh, I don't use that much. I just sort of went, oh, goody. Right? Yeah, play hardball, right? So, so I went, hey, are we going to unload the boxes or what? So I went, yeah, man, let's unload the fucking boxes. Anyway, I came home. I had really had enough of New York. I got my second week paycheck, a temporary job, got the money, and it was sort of like, well, goody. I think it's time to pack, because I've sort of had it. Okay, now dig this, okay? Because this, again, is an absolute mind blower. Okay. But I was ready to leave, but the phone rings, okay? And I was foolish. I didn't jot down this fellow's name, which I really wasn't sharp, but I was off center. I was nervous. I really was. But he says, this is so-and-so. I'm an editor at the New York Times Sunday Magazine section. I said, oh, are you really? So he said, oh, yes. He said, now, you remember I had been, jesting or whatever the hell, foolishly, saying, get a job at New York Times.
Just
right?
with the 2 first
right,
agents.
Set up person, right?
So this was, what, about 2 weeks after that happened?
Yeah, yeah. I guess they had worked it out. They had cleared it, right? Okay.
And had you sent your resume to the New York Times?
No. Hold on. So I said, oh, yeah? So I wanted to see how he was going to handle this, So he says, well, we at the New York Times, like, we're very well connected with a lot of different people. I said, I've heard that. So he said, and New York City, we're always looking for very talented people, And, we have some people who work in employment environments and things like that. And I've seen a copy of your resume, right? I said, oh, have you? I said, oh, yeah. And he said, would you like to come in for an interview? I said, hey, man, I wouldn't miss it for the world. Okay? So I want to read a segment of that that covers that,
and this is from your book, Transgressions.
This is from my book, Transgressions, by Ronald Howard Cohen. Okay. I didn't want to feel fear or awe, but I did. I was going to an interview at the New York Times, the paper of record. It was hard not to be impressed. I took the subway up to 42nd Street in Times Square and walked over to 43rd Street. The Times building ran the entire block from 7th to 8th Avenue. There was a workman's-style cafe across from the Times, and I decided to sip on a cup of coffee for a few minutes. I still had about a quarter of an hour till my appointment. I'm going to cut more into... I entered the jammed elevator and watched for my floor to light up on an indicator above the floor. I was still nervous. Even in this crowded elevator, the air itself seemed to be thinning out, bringing everything into focus, making details distinct. I was entering some sort of center of power. You'll be all right, I told myself. As soon as you actually meet this guy, you'll be all right. Mr. Berg is just one more human. My floor arrived and I got off the elevator. There was another reception desk right ahead of me with the sign saying, The Sunday Times Magazine, on the wall behind it. I told the man sitting there that I had an appointment with Mr. Berg, and he lifted the receiver of the phone on his desk and announced me. Mr. Rosen is here to see you, Mr. Berg. Okay, now, let me cut into this a little. Okay, now he comes out and he says, look, why don't we talk up in the cafeteria? Okay, and we walked down the hall there to the employees' cafeteria. Almost all of the many tables in the cafeteria were empty. There was a good food serving area off to the side, and Mr. Berg started to walk towards it. Grab a seat at the back table, will you? That one back there looks good. How do you take your coffee? I told him, and I went way down the room to sit at the table he had pointed to. There sure wasn't any chance of our conversation being overheard. I looked at the leaves of a potted plant waving from the effects of the circulating air or air conditioning. My nervousness had disappeared. This was some interview. The man seemed ready to give me the store. I was terribly confused. Okay. Comes back. We chit-chat. I guess you know the Sunday magazines gets one hell of a lot of copy filled with a lot of so-called facts that need some very careful checking. You ever do that sort of work? I always like to check my facts, I smiled at him. Good, he smiled back. A very good policy. He looked down at my resume for a while and then up at me. We both sipped at our coffee. We've got a slot that pays $45,000 a year. My face must have shown how much that figure struck me. I know that the smaller places don't pay that sort of scale, but this is the times. I don't know how my co-worker will take to taking on someone new right now. I will have to check with her. I looked around the almost deserted cafeteria for a minute, and I sighed deeply. As I looked down the room to a table where a woman and two men sat chatting, they were talking together like comrades. In my soul, I wanted to be sitting there, to be one of them. So, at an out-of-the-way back table in a nice, clean cafeteria, I came to decision time. I couldn't do it. Damn it all to hell, I couldn't do it. Mr. Berg, can I ask you something? Certainly, what? What's going on here? I mean, I don't have the credentials for this job. Most of my resume is sheer fluff and gun smoke. I'm pretty sure you can see that. He nodded and looked straight at me, feeling, I'm sure, 10 times more uncomfortable than he had been only a few minutes before. Obviously, I was going to turn out to be a real character. Of course, I'm thrilled at having an opportunity like this. In fact, if I had come upon it honestly, I'd be jumping all over the place. But I can't do anything if I don't know what really is going on. I don't know what to say, Mr. Berg replied. I know that about 10 years ago, a Senate committee said that the CIA and some newspapers were involved with each other, but I thought that it all stopped. Mr. Berg didn't like the sound of the word CIA, but he reacted like an editor who spent his life checking facts and sticking to them. Yes, in the 1970s, I believe it was 15 newspapers, a dozen major book publishing companies, and about 400 writers and journalists. If I remember correctly, he grimaced and continued. If I remember correctly, staring at me, he grimaced, some fellows have found it all to be very lucrative. All of that has gone on all the time I've been here, and I've been here for some time. There never seems to be a problem recruiting people. I personally think it's all very dangerous practice. But others say that's the only way to know which whore is trying to take a piss on you. Do you feel that way? I believe in accuracy, he said, and our discussion was over. Okay, it goes on considerable lengths from there, but I did want to get that all.
So how close to that was that to what really happened to you? Was that
that was pretty close, Jim. That one was pretty close. Oh yeah. That now you got to keep in mind what I've now done. Okay.
So right now I've
told them to take a hike, as you say, and then, they offer me $45,000 gig. I'm not going to take a bribe. Okay. Yuck. I'm a real yuck, right? I mean, to their community. I mean, they're being nice.
Yeah.
They just told me that there's no freedom of the press. And my book isn't going to get published, but they're going to get me a job at the New York Times. I clear it. I get in touch with my agent, who never was able to sell the book, and we finally parted company. She gave up. I told my agent I'm going back to Canada, okay, and I'm going to get relocated there, and we'll stay in touch by phone and mail, okay. So I went back to Canada, and I got the same feeling I always get when I cross the border. Oh, thank God. For whatever you got going here, at least, it's some degree rational. Anyway, so I came back, took a whole process, where I got an apartment, okay, got some furniture, but I still had other stuff. I had all my stuff stored.
Moved to Toronto at this point?
Moved back to Toronto. The thing is, I'm now ready to go back to Brattleboro, Vermont, okay?
Where you still have all of your
of my stuff stored. Okay. Now I hire a moving man.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. To drive down to Brattleboro, Vermont.
Right.
Okay. Load up all of my possessions, including my life's work, all of my writing. Okay. And go back to Toronto with it. Okay. Very nice moving guy. He and his girlfriend. We drove down in his van, and I said, that's fine, pay the mileage, I don't think we'll have to stay over, but if we do, etc. Okay. Went down there. We had lunch in Brattleboro. Very nice town, by the way. It's sort of a wine and cheese cracker place for ski lodges and people who are academics in Harvard and MIT, aside from being just Vermont. Anyway, which is very pretty in the autumn. But we had lunch, and where this was stored was Hillwind's farm, okay, which was a farm with a very big barn, okay, that had been converted into a storage facility, okay.
Storage lockers.
Storage lockers, okay. So we drive out to Hillwind's farm, okay. So we bring the truck in through the the front where the horses came in, and now the truck pulls in, and it's like paddocks, but they're now storage facilities rather than paddocks, right? And I go to open my lock. Now there's a caretaker. This is like out in the boonies, okay. But there's a caretaker who lives on the premises, okay? And every month I had paid the rent there, and even was in correspondence with them, and to some degree, they were nice people, And I went to open my lock. That's not my lock. On the clasp. I went, huh? So I said, wait here, to the driver and his girlfriend, and I said, I got to find out what's happening here. Okay? So I went over to the caretaker's facility, and I said, what's with the lock? She said, well, Mr. Cohen, I didn't understand. She said, you're a very responsible guy, but you must have, forgot to put your lock on. Well, you came down here, before you went back to Canada, you came back here and took some stuff. You must have forgotten to put your lock on. Because I went, I keep the place very secure, and I went walking through there, and I noticed you didn't have a lock on your locker. And she said, so I put a lock on. I said, oh, really? She said, yeah, I'll open it for you. So she opened the locker for me. Now, my first impression was it's all there.
And you were you sure at that point that you had put the lock on?
Oh yeah, because I'm a total paranoid about those type of things. What I do when I lock something, I pull on it. Okay, I pull on it and I pull on it, until I have to tell myself, Ronnie, you're going to stop. It's locked. Okay. So I know, it's just anyone who knows me knows it's not the type of thing I do. Mm-hmm. I'm anally retentive or something to the degree of that type of stuff. Okay.
So you opened your locker, you saw all your stuff there.
So it seemed like a full, storage space filled with stuff. I don't know. Maybe it's kids. What the hell do I know? So I look around, and my hi-fi, my record stuff is there, and I see books are there, and I don't know. Let's load the truck up. Okay. So I said, well, thank you very much. She takes off. And we load the truck up. Okay. The truck's loaded, and something's like, but I'm not quite sure what. Okay. So we get in the truck, and I say, we got to stop in town. He said, why? I said, I want to stop at the police station. Okay? Okay, you paying? We stop at the police station. I go in. I say to the guy at the desk, I say, look, I wanted you to take this all down. This is official business, okay? Told him who I was. I have a little card that says writer, okay? Ronald Howard Cohen, writer, okay? I said, look, told him the whole story. I said, because this is what was in my mind, and I wanted to cover my backside this way. Mm-hmm. I said, look, I don't have any drugs. You understand me? I am not a drug dealer, okay? If I get stopped at the border and they go through my stuff and find drugs, I want you to know that I reported this and I didn't have them. They were planted there, okay? And I said, look, there's a whole long story about it. I may just be off the wall right now. It won't be necessary. I hope it's not necessary. So there's no reason for me going into the whole long story. And he's a rural cop. We get on the highway. And then shivers through me. I went, oh no. I said, stop the truck. What I had remembered, okay, we had lifted, okay, first of all, it registered just at the same minute, I had more boxes. My writing was in some boxes. Those boxes weren't there, okay. But more, what struck me was I had a lot of writing in these two trunks, okay. And, that was all of my work, from stuff that I had my original first story that I did when I was 8 years old, okay? I had poetry readings on tapes that I had given in New York, not only that, but I had my commercial portfolio, as an advertising copywriter. I had all this stuff, right? And my clippings and blah, 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 So,
plus all of your manuscripts for your
all
books.
of my manuscripts for my unpublished novels and short stories and poems and plays and essays and on and on. So,
your life's work.
Yeah, when we had loaded the trucks, okay, when those were heavy trunks, okay, they had a lot of stuff in them. It was a two-man job that you had to lift the trunk onto the truck to get, okay. When we had loaded those trunks, it was like, oh, throw that on the trunk. Throw it on the trunk. How could I have thrown my trunk on the truck? impossible. So I said, stop the, that's true. I said, stop the truck. He stopped the truck, and I went into the back of the truck, okay? And I opened up both, took stuff out, opened up both trunks, empty. And then I realized I have a computer, but I also had a number of portable typewriters. I was a typewriter nut, and I had a typewriter, a Royal from 1920s that worked, okay? And that was gone too, okay? Message, you know. I just sat there, and the couple came around, and I was crying, right? And they said, what? And I just said, no, nothing. I couldn't tell them the whole story, man. They would have said, like, what have we gotten into here, So I said, look, let's just load the truck up, and we'll go back to Toronto, okay? So we drove back to Toronto, and they were very sophisticated, nice people. They didn't ask any questions. We got back to Toronto, and I unpacked, and I was devastated. I just sort of felt like, this gets into a very bad emotional turn. Boy, I was really pissed. What do you do after your life work is stolen? All right? Well, I got the answer. You write about it. Okay? So, I sat down. I said, page 1, transgression. And we're going to start back 30 years ago. And now we got 2 incidents to write about, okay? So the book, in manuscript size, doubled in size, okay? But I've rewritten it. It's rewritten. It's gone out to agencies that I've had, to publishers, that I've had feedback on. Talking major league publishing houses, and we're talking about senior fiction editors, okay? We're talking about top of the heap, Jim, okay? Who have said to me over the phone, one editor said, Ron, I've worked here a hell of a long time, okay? You made the cut. You made the decision table, okay? We had a cut 4, okay? We were only going to publish, X number of books, okay? So I've seen long fights, okay, over which ones we were going to go with, okay. She said, we didn't go with this. She said, keep at it. Try and get it published, She sounded like she was a little disgusted that she had thought that, you got to understand, you're dealing with heavyweight dudes, right, that it's a type of publishing house decision that, as far as I can make out, it doesn't, it's like the editor talks to the publisher and goes for a 2-hour lunch and says, okay, do you want to publish this thing? And we go lawyers, and we go lots of money and lots of fights, or what? Yeah. I've asked myself quite intensely, saying, look, what is this crap? First of all, is this thing any good? And I've reread it cold. I said, yes, good work. Okay. So then what gives? Well, this thing could make somebody some bucks, and there are high-risk rollers there. Anyway, after Clinton got in, I got on the computer. I got the new lineup card, in Washington, D.C., and I started sending out letters. To all, hello, welcome aboard, hello, this is stuff that hasn't been looked at under the Nixon administration and the Reagan administration. Eventually, what happened with that was the U.S. Senate Oversight Committee, whose vice chair is Senator Bob Kerrey from Nebraska. He wrote me back, and basically, I'm not quoting word for word, he basically said, all right, man, you straight shooter, what you got? I'll have somebody check it out. Okay.
This is under Clinton now.
Under Clinton, okay.
Had you been in contact with Bob Kerrey before?
No, no. He was a new cast. If you've ever been in a senator's office, and I have, boy, they got lots of files and papers and lots of different stuff, right? So he has a staff person, okay? And that's really who you work with. So there was a gentleman who was on the committee, Senate Oversight Intelligence Committee, which is the committee that's supposed to be the oversight committee for the intelligence community, okay? They're the ones who supposedly, in the back room or in camera, supposedly they say, what's going on? And supposedly they're supposed to be told what's going on, all right? So he was, I don't know, in his 30s, okay? So he did he said, look, I'm really busy. He said, I've taken this on my plate. It's a little heavy for me to be doing, but okay, I got to do what I got to do. So, but as he said, because he would call me on the phone, he said, hey, man, I'm open. He said, as far as I know, from what I found out, anything is possible. Okay? So, that's from the horse in the stable, okay? That's from talking down at the barn, okay? And at some point, there was some headway, it seemed to me, since I had been sandbagged, as the saying goes, where you don't get any information, for so long.
At least you got some positive feedback.
It seemed I didn't. People didn't call me on the phone to call me Ron. We had more aristocratic. Well, Mr. Cohen, we'll more look into that for you without a doubt, and we'll be back in touch. So I felt there was some movement. Okay, but. Then I got a letter back most recently, okay, well, relatively recently, that was much more formal from this fellow at the Senate Oversight Committee, and it was basically a turn down. I got on the phone with him and I said, hey, what shakes? And it was much more formal response. What I had, okay, as per documentation, okay, I had the company names of all the setup situations. I had the dates. I went home and I scribbled. Okay? I had the dates. I had the names of these people who they identified themselves as. This guy said he's from the CIA. This guy said he's from the FBI. He met me on such and such a date at such and such a time. Okay? Okay. I had all of that. Okay? Which is pretty good, something to look into about. Okay? So, I had sent that to his researcher on the subcommittee, and Kerry writes me back, and he says, well, if you have something, but right now there's nothing, right? So I wrote him back a letter, and I said, dear Robert, man to man, since I'm an asshole enough, to maybe even go back to New York or Washington or whatever the hell it is, what exactly would you like me to bring you on your desk? So he hasn't written back to that. Maybe it was Dear Robert, I don't know.
We have been listening to an interview with Ronald Howard Cohen, a survivor of abduction and drugging by the CIA and U.S. military, and his subsequent harassment by agencies of the U.S. government and interfering in his efforts to publish a book about his ordeal. Please excuse the strong language that was used in the show, but I felt it was important to include what Ronald's account of what was actually said in his interactions with the U.S. government agents. This has been part 8 of a series about mind control on the International Connection here on CKLN. Next week we are featuring a panel discussion entitled An Overview of Ritual Abuse, Mind Control and Dissociation with Walter Boart, Alan Shefflin, and Randy Noblet.